It is Luca here, back with a Raptors post-game video. Thought I would do things differently this time around. I wanted to do a live here as we wind down on the Raptors season. Thought I would bring in my good buddy, Matthew Valento, beat writer of the RaptorsNation.com website. And Matthew, I mean, it's tough being a Raptors fan these days. Obviously, the team suffering some major injuries, and it looked like at one point they were pushing for the play-in tournaments, and that quickly changed as the Raptors have been doing a ton of losing. They just dropped their 7th game, 8 of their last 9. They're clearly tanking. We're gonna talk about it, but Matthew, how you doing? And thanks for joining me on this post-game live.
Yeah, I'm doing good. Hopefully, you're doing the same. Thank you for having me again. It's going to be fun talking about it. My first time watching the Raptors in a minute, so it'll be interesting to dissect this game.
I first got to ask you, Matthew, viral moment after the game. I mean, that was quite the jersey swap, to say the least, between Grady Dick and Anthony Black. It's making its rounds on social media. They've definitely meant for that to happen, right?
Yeah, I definitely agree. They definitely knew what they were doing there. Definitely, probably the best jersey swap I've ever seen. So if you haven't seen it, go check it out. It's hilarious.
It gave us some comedic relief from this one as the Raptors. I mean, it was another tough go. Obviously, they were going to have a tough time in Orlando as the Magic sweep the Raptors for the season, 3-0. This was the second of a 2-game mini set between the teams. Raptors, Magic met on Friday. Raptors losing that was far more competitive in that one. Tonight, though, Raptors visiting Orlando, and the Magic, they once again had a big run in that third quarter to kind of bust this game wide open, outscoring the Raptors 35-26. They were led by their all-star Paolo Banchero. He had 29 points as Banchero continues his impressive season. Franz Wagner had 22 points, 9 rebounds, 5 assists. And for the Raptors, it was Jordan Nwora who led the injury-ravaged Raptors with 18 points, and he did have 12 during a very impressive third quarter burst. Gary Trent Jr., who had 31 on Friday night, he had 15, and then Emmanuel Quickley and Bruce Brown had 12. So, Matthew, in this one, this was, a game that you zeroed in on. What stood out to you in the midst of the Raptors' struggles? What were some positive takeaways from this?
I think with the first quarter, the Magic really jumped out on them defensively. I believe they started the game out 11-2, and I think for the Raptors, they definitely could have phoned it in and be like, oh, yeah, this is going to be another one of those games. But I think they showed some good signs of fight. I know, for example, Emmanuel Quickley didn't have a great game, 4 for 15, but I think the Raptors showed some great signs of fight. I think that's a positive. You got a young team around Scotty Barnes, who's now out. So a lot of guys kind of vying for playing time for next season. As you mentioned, Jordan Nwora, he was a pretty good bright spot in this one. So overall, I think the Magic played with a lot of intensity defensively. They've been a good defensive team all year long. And I think for Toronto to respond, they've made this – the Magic went on their runs throughout this game, and Toronto responded timely. But I think their effort and energy was kind of good throughout this game until the fourth quarter. So I think it was pretty positive despite the lack of offense in this one.
Yeah, the Raptors, they also struggled from 3 in this one, so it was a tough go from there. But yeah, you're absolutely right. In a game like this, where you're not expected to win, the Raptors are once again underdogs. You got to look for bright spots, and the Raptors, they did have their moments in this game where they were pushing, being competitive. And I think what's important for fans as we approach the end of the season, just 14 games left, is to look at those little individual storylines that are going to kind of carry over, guys vying for playing time for next season. Because when you look at this team, you know who the core pieces are going to be, but there's still a lot of question marks, kind of who's going to round out the rotation. You got some intriguing pieces, guys like Nwora, Porter, a Ramsey, who the Raptors signed to another 10-day contract, Freeman Liberty, who got, a couple minutes in this one. These are going to be players that are going to get ample opportunities to shine. And then the players who are going to for sure be a part of the rotation, this is their opportunity to really showcase their talents and continue to develop their game. A Baji who has been struggling from the field with his shooting. I know his defense has been there, but can he get it going offensively? And then Grady Dick, I mean, he has been getting consistent starts, which is nice to see. He had 10 points in this one, 4 of 11 shooting, but can he get more into a consistent rhythm? Because, there's obviously the big question mark of whether or not the Raptors are going to bring back Gary Trent Jr. So I think it is important to zero in on kind of those positives. And, looking at this one, I thought Wara did a really good job when it kind of looked like the Raptors were falling apart and tinkering away. And Wara really led by example. He by far had the best game. He was the a plus 10, 18 points, 7 to 9 from the field, 1 of 3 from three, as threes were hard to come by in this game for the Raptors. They only had 8 of 31 attempts. So it was brutal. But Wara, I mean, this is a guy who, yeah, like I said, he's got a lot to play for, and he's an unrestricted free agent. So, Matthew, this is his opportunity to really put on a good audition for the Raptors. And I'm kind of leaning towards the Raptors for sure, making an offer, an aggressive offer for and bringing him back. Because I think, especially if he continues to play like this to close out the season, there's a spot for him with the second unit going into next season.
Yeah, I would agree. I think at this point in a rebuild, you kind of just take flyers on guys who haven't necessarily gotten a lot of playing time. I know Nora played in Milwaukee and Indiana, saw some rotational minutes here and there, but nothing too crazy. And I know when he first came over here, he had some pretty solid performances. So I think now, as the season winds down, he's going to get more opportunity and going to basically see what he's made of and if he's worth keeping around. But I mean, I can't imagine he's going to cost too much with the sample size he's shown thus far. So I don't think it costs too much to retain him, and I don't really see a reason why not to retain him. Still 25 years old, so there's still time for him to grow and could definitely be a solid bench piece moving forward for sure. I can see it.
Yeah, of course, Wara came on over in the deal involving Pascal Siakam. We appreciate everybody in the live stream right now. If you guys want to leave any questions, feel free to do so, because if there are any questions, Matt and I will do a Q&A towards the end of this one. So, yeah, definitely let us know your thoughts. It doesn't have to be about this game. I know there weren't a lot of talking points from this one, but just your overall thoughts in terms of the Raptors season and how you want to see them finishing up with, again, just 14 games left on this season. Matt, let's talk about Emmanuel quickly. I touched on this on the Raptors Nation pod last Thursday. I want to get your thoughts on this. Emmanuel quickly, he's really taken his game to the next level in terms of being that playmaker that you want to see him be, especially if he's going to be, the Raptors franchise point guard and somebody who's going to be a part of that core that we keep talking about of he, RJ, and Scotty Barnes. Quickly did struggle in this game from the field, 4-15 from the field, 0-6 from 3. But overall, his shooting numbers have trended upwards from the All-Star break, which is what you want to see. He's a restricted free agent this offseason. It's literally a guarantee at this point. I mean, close to one. The Raptors are going to bring him back and give him something that's going to be, make him happy and keep him around. What do you think that number is going to be? It was reported by Michael Grange right after they traded for Quickly that the number was going to maybe be around $27 million over a 5-year deal. But Quickly, I mean, he's got a lot to play for in these final 14 games. No RJ for the foreseeable future as he's away from the team. Scotty Barnes is injured. So this is basically Quickly's team. If he leaves a good impression and continues for the most part to play very, very well, what do you think that number looks like? Because I did speculate on the pod, maybe we see Quickly get that 30 million mark being like the best case scenario for him, or do you think it'll be on the lower mark of 27 or even less than that? I've seen even 25 come up.
Based off gut instinct, I would probably say around 20 to 25 million if I had to put a number on it. But restricted free agency is always a little bit tricky. So it'll be interesting to see if there are contending teams out there that will be willing to try and tempt Toronto into not matching. But I think regardless of if it crawls up to that $30 million mark, I think at this point for Toronto, he and RJ were kind of the two guys that were the blockbuster trade of the OG one. So whether it gets up to 30 million, which could enter the area of an overpay, will be interesting. But I think at this point, it's a no brainer. And he's shooting 40% on 7 attempts, which is really great.
Yeah.
And his scoring numbers have been going up. So I think at this point, he's the franchise point guard moving forward in this rebuild. So I think, regardless of the number, he's just a must keep at this point. And I think 25 to like 27 is probably a fair estimate. But if it gets up to 30, I'm not overall too mad about it since he's
Yeah.
a really good scorer.
Yeah, I think that's perfectly said. And I think, the Raptors are in a position where we could see an overpay in a lot of people's eyes because they do view quickly as their franchise point guard. And I think it could get up to 30, getting that Tyler Hero type of money and contract. And quickly, he can definitely warrant that. Like if he continues to impress here, doesn't have too many of these off games like we saw in Orlando, and really shows us what he can do offensively. His passing ability has really impressed me, having a career high 18
Mhm.
assists that game against Phoenix, a game they had no business being in. Emmanuel quickly, he is showing a lot of good tendencies. So I agree. I think if it does trickle to that $30 million range, nobody's going to be mad because we want quickly, obviously, here and to grow with the core. And Raptors basically signed themselves up for it when they traded OG Anunoby for the pieces that they did, that they're going to do whatever it takes to keep this trio of young players together for as long as they can. And it's going to start this summer with quickly. So, yeah, I think we will see 27 to 30. I'll still stay with that prediction. I mean, if the Raptors can get him for less than that, that'd be a huge,
Yeah.
huge bargain. But they'll do whatever it takes to keep him happy. So I think a lot of people will be okay with that. Keep your questions coming, guys, as we see some more people trickle in. Appreciate you guys being on this Raptors post game live. It is Luca Rosano alongside Matthew Valento as we are talking Raptors at this point, just talking about the Raptors season as we wind down and see what's going to happen with this team and where they're going to find themselves in the standings. We do have a question here. When will RJ Barrett return? So, yeah, obviously, RJ Barrett, guys, if you don't know, he is away from the team for the foreseeable future. Unfortunately, RJ Barrett's brother passed away after feeling ill. The death was announced by the Toronto Raptors and Basketball Canada on Thursday as Nathan Tyler Barrett tragically passes away. Very, very unforeseen circumstances. And obviously, RJ, being the older brother, he's been given just immense amount of time away from the team. Darko came out and said that they are going to do whatever they can to really console RJ through this difficult time and give him as much time as he needs. And obviously that is the right call here. So I don't expect we'll see RJ until next season. And it's very difficult what he's going through. And we just want to offer our condolences to RJ Barrett and the entire Barrett family following the very, very unfortunate news that came to us last week. So, RJ Barrett, we're pulling for you. We're wishing you all the best, and hopefully, he can come back strong and play in memory of his brother from here on out.
Yeah, truly unfortunate circumstances. Again, condolences to him and his family. I can't even imagine. But yeah, the from Twitter, I saw a lot of support in his corner, and I know RJ and his family have spoken out about the appreciation for all the love and support. So that's all we can do at this point. Again, I probably wouldn't expect him to be back this season. He looked great in his time wearing a Raptors jersey, but yeah, truly condolences to him and his family. I can't again even imagine losing someone in the immediate family. So I hope he and his family get their privacy and are able to heal through this tough time.
Yeah, no, that is perfectly said. And again, yeah, just giving them all the time they need, privacy, and just showering them with love because that's definitely what they need right now. As Joshua, yeah, I don't think he's going to be back. Like I said, next season seems a more realistic timeline as the Raptors obviously are in this period right now that they don't need RJ to rush back. So, yeah, they're going to give him as much time as he needs, as Darko Riakovic alluded to, and he should definitely take his time. So, we will see RJ. We will see Scotty Barnes, who in all likelihood is going to be gone for the rest of the season, Jakob Poeltl, and the rest of next year's rendition of the Raptors, as we still don't know where the Raptors are, going to finish in the overall standings, and if they're going to have 2 picks to work with or even 3 in this upcoming draft. And I do want to look ahead now because the Raptors, they do have 14 games left. And clearly, Matthew, I mean, we see it. Everybody sees the Raptors with the longest active losing streak in the NBA. They have their sights set on trying to keep their first round pick. And right now, they have the exact record as the Memphis Grizzlies, who lost yesterday, barely. I mean, I was really pulling for the Thunder and that Thunder upset. And I thought it was going to happen at one point, but it unfortunately didn't. So they are both tied with the exact same record. Both of them have the 6th worst record in the NBA. So if both teams end the season with the 6th worst record in the NBA, it would actually be determined by a coin flip who would have the 6th best odds in the draft lottery. So could you imagine the season comes down to a coin flip for the Toronto Raptors' fate of keeping their pick? But you look at the Raptors, they're losing a bunch of these games. And I said on the pod, Matthew, over under Raptors wins for the rest of the season, I'm setting it at 3 because you look at the Raptors' final 14 games, ready? They got the Sacramento Kings on Wednesday, playoff team. They got the Thunder, playoff team. Then they got the Wizards and Nets. That's probably where you can win some, maybe one game. Then you got the Knicks, playoff team. 76ers, Lakers, Timberwolves, Bucks, playoff teams. Then they got the Wizards again, winnable game. Pacers, playoff team. Nets. And then you finish the season with 2 games against the Heat, both playoff teams. So, Matthew, given that schedule and who they got, obviously they got the Nets and the Wizards 2 times each. Over, under 3. Are you going over or under that? Raptors wins for the rest of the season.
Ooh, that is tough. I'll probably go. I'll go under. I think it's tough because I know. I mean, they lost to the Pistons, which is as low as it gets. I think you can probably take one or both of the Washington games, depending on who's healthy. I know they played today, and like a bunch of their guys sat out. So, I think the Washington games could be interesting. You could probably pick up 2 there. And I think probably the only other 2 games that they might be a coin flip is the Brooklyn games. I know Brooklyn's been pretty bad, but I think at this point, Brooklyn's a little bit more healthy than Toronto at this point. So it'll be interesting. They definitely play a lot of playoff teams, but for the tank's sake, I'll go under, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to say over. I know I said wow to your your response, but I'm going to go under as well because, you look at where the Raptors stand right now. I don't see many more wins from this team.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if you can make the case they're going to lose out because that would be really hard to do, losing the rest of these 14 games, because I just feel like the Wizards, they are very bad. I know the Raptors did just lose to the Pistons, but the Wizards, they're going to finish in all likelihood with the worst record in the NBA. They're just in their next level being bad. So I definitely see the Raptors picking up a win against them, if not 2. The Nets, like you said, a little bit more healthy than the Raptors. But, man, like if the Raptors are shorthanded the rest of the way, which is looking to be the case with no RJ, no Barnes, no Pirtle for sure, it's going to be tough to see them pull out a win against these playoff teams. And we're talking about, quality teams that are going to be in a position like your Lakers on April 2nd, where they're going to be in must-win situations and they're not going to be able to take, teams like the Raptors for granted. So, yeah, I'm with you on that. Let us know in the chat, over under 3 wins. But yeah, I could see the Raptors win 2 games, honestly, the rest of the way. I'll go as far as saying they'll beat the Wizards and the Nets once each, and then they'll lose the other against that team. And I got the Raptors going a big goose egg against all the other playoff teams, just because I feel like those playoff teams, they're going to have a lot to play for in terms of play-in or playoff implications. So, That should be good enough, I would think. Like if the Raptors get 2 wins max over the next 14, I think that should beat out the Grizzlies. I haven't taken a look at the Grizzlies schedule. I'll pull it up right now. But what do you think, Matthew? If the Raptors go under 3 wins, do you think they can get that 6th worst record?
Yeah, I think so. For some good news for Raptors fans is Desmond Bain just came back in that last game, so
Yeah.
that should help the Grizzlies winning a little bit more games. Yeah, I don't know the Grizzlies' schedule, but I know Jaren Jackson's still playing some games here and there. So just pray that Desmond Bain and Jaren Jackson play a good chunk of the way. I know the
Yeah.
Grizzlies. Yeah, looking at the Grizzlies, they got some easy games here. They got Detroit twice, San Antonio. So they those are probably like the three for sure games they can probably win. So it'll be interesting for sure. They played OKC close, so maybe they can get a little upset going. But I think the Raptors are able to go under 3 wins. I can imagine they'll probably be in good shape.
Yeah, I agree. And yeah, looking at the Grizzlies schedule, it helps that they are going to be taking on the Spurs, who haven't been good. I think they would be favored in both of those Pistons
Yeah.
matchups. So yeah, it is looking good for the Raptors in terms of their tanking situation. But even if the Raptors finish with the 6th worst odds, it doesn't guarantee them that pick. That's the
Mhm.
crazy part about this, where like they can do all this losing, set it up on a platter. They would still just have a 45.8% chance, which is obviously less than 50% chance of keeping that first round pick for 2024. So it goes back to the whole Jakob trade, right? When the Raptors made that trade, it was a win now move, and you knew you were giving up a future asset because sooner or later the Raptors are going to have to pay up. If they keep this pick, then they owe their 2025 first round pick to the Spurs. If they're somehow a bottom 6 team and keep that pick, then they owe the 2026 first round pick to the Spurs. And if somehow, with luck and a lot of losing and misery from this fan base, if the Raptors are a bottom 6 team in 2026 and keep that pick, then I believe they then owe the Spurs 2 second rounders. So that would be obviously a lot less than giving up a first. But going back to that trade, Matthew, I gave, my fair share of opinions on it. A lot of the fan base, they've accepted the fact that it happened. They view Pirtle as a part of this team going forward. I would say I still don't know if Jakob Pirtle is going to be with the Raptors. I mean, he is locked up with the team, but that's not to say we could potentially see some trades go down this offseason for some players on this team. So, given where the Raptors are with Pirtle, for as good as he is, having some injury issues doesn't help his causes at all. And the fact that the Raptors are in a rebuild, they're a tanking team right now. Having that pick locked up does not look good on paper. What were your thoughts when the trade went down? Were you initially a fan of it? And looking at it now, do you think the Raptors made a big mistake making that trade for Pirtle when they do have a pretty significant asset tied to him?
Um, when the trade first happened, I was a little surprised. I know I talked about it the first time I was on the pod. I expected the Raptors to blow it up last season. I mean, it made sense towards the finale of the deadline. You got the sense that the Raptors were keeping their guys. And in a vacuum, it's a good trade because Jakob Poeltl is a pretty good defensive center, a lob threat, doesn't require the ball. So, yeah, it's in a vacuum, I guess it makes sense. They were trying to chase some play-in playoff hopes, but now um, signing him to an extension didn't make a whole lot of sense either.
Yeah.
Currently 28, and then he's going to be 31 heading into his player option. So I think it makes sense to shop him this offseason. I know he talked about how he wants to play winning basketball, and that's just not going to happen, at least for the next couple of seasons. So um, be interesting to see if you'll be able to get a first round pick back that you give up for him. So it'll be interesting to see, but I think it makes sense to shop him. His salary is not too bad, making 19 and a half a year, so it's nothing too crazy. But yeah, I think in a sense you should have just moved off him and just accepted tanking. sooner rather than later. But I think you'll be able to get at least some kind of draft asset for him for sure.
And I think in a rebuild situation, like you need a veteran presence. You don't want all young guys, but
Mhm.
the Raptors just locked up Kelly Olynyk. So I think he's the veteran presence and the veteran
Yeah.
center that they already have. So you don't need two veteran centers on a team that is rebuilding in that youth movement. So by locking up Olynyk, they have him at a much cheaper rate. Obviously, they're locked into the deal with Pirtle. And I do agree that they should try to move him because look, the Raptors are a much better team with Jakob Poeltl. The stats say so. They've been terrible without him. Obviously, he's a good player. It's not like he's bad. Great rim protector, able to block shots, able to feast inside when he does have that soft touch going. But he is in that stretch five, that stretch big, who I think would benefit playing alongside Scotty Barnes when he is running the offense. So the Raptors, yeah, they doubled down on the move because, like you said, they've locked him into that deal. He's only getting older, so it doesn't make sense from a timeline standpoint. And also, yeah, you mentioned it. He said he wants to win, and there's no guarantees with this rebuild. Like any rebuild, you don't know how long it's going to take. In a perfect world, you hope it kind of expedites fast, and this team's back this time next season, and they're fighting for the play-in at least. But that might not be the reality. The Raptors could very well be a bottom six team again, and Pirtle has come out and said that he wants to win. So when I look at this roster, Matthew, yeah, the two guys that I think could be on the trade block that make a lot of sense, and maybe you could get that first round pick, like you said, Jakob Poeltl, and then the other is Bruce Brown. Because I was very surprised the Raptors didn't trade Bruce Brown at the deadline, who, by the way, I wanted the Raptors to shop Poeltl at the deadline too, FYI. But Bobby Webster came out and said that they didn't rush a deal for Bruce Brown because they didn't get back what they wanted. And the thing about Bruce Brown is he does have another year on his contract. So we could see Bruce Brown and potentially Pirtle come up in the trades around the draft when you see those types of deals go down. But I think for this young Raptors team, going back to Pirtle, yeah, you locked up Olynyk. I know it's only a 2-year deal, but he's kind of your veteran presence. Doesn't make much sense to have Pirtle going forward here, especially if you can get a younger center with this young core. So we'll see what happens. I know the players like Pirtle. The Raptors have been a better team with him. I mean, he's not 30 plus to say, and he's still kind of, you know, I guess just entering his prime. But yeah, it doesn't make sense from a timeline standpoint. And then if you do trade Pirtle, how are you going to dress them? Are you going to do it via the draft, try to trade for a younger player, or get somebody via free agency? I know Nick Claxton is an unrestricted free agent, so I know he's been linked to the Raptors a ton going back to a couple seasons before. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what they do with Yak. As Paradise Lost, thanks for being in here, says they are awful without Yak. And yeah, literally just touched on that in terms of the team just being not good without him. So he does make a difference on this team. I don't trust their coaching staff. Okay, actually, this is a good segue. What what are your thoughts on Darko Rajakovic? Because it's funny. A lot of people were screaming one and done when the Raptors were doing a bunch of losing. But I think Darko has won a lot of respect back, winning some of the games out of the All-Star break, going on a 3-game winning streak. Like you said, having this team still play hard in some of these games because the Raptors have lost a ton, but in those games they had no business being in, Suns, Nuggets, they have played hard. So where do you see Darko? Like, is there any possibility he is one and done, or are you for sure giving him another look here for next season?
I think there's no way they move off of him. I think it's a little bit of unfortunate circumstances because at the beginning of the season, they brought him in they were still trying to win. OG and Siakam were still here. So I think they brought him in to just bring in a new voice. And while he's dealt with a lot of change, his whole team has just done a 360 on him. So he's still trying to figure it out. But I think he's shown some promise. He's gotten his guys to play hard. um, as they're injury riddled. So he was in Memphis during their rebuild and with Ja and Jaron and all them. So I think it's probably best to give him at least another year to see what he can really do. Um, it'll be interesting to see if he's a coach that's able to rebuild a franchise. So that'll be something worth monitoring. But I see his passion on the sideline, just watching one game, and I think he connects well with players, which I think is very huge as a coach to be able to tap in with your players, especially as you're building together. So I think that's a pretty huge factor. And losing is never easy. Obviously, it doesn't look great right now, but I think with Darko, he's definitely got a little bit of upside. I think so. He could be one of the better coaches. I know it's kind of an extreme example, but you saw it with OKC's coach Mark Dagnall. He's turned that thing around in a couple of seasons. So I think you just got to give it a little bit more time before we call it quits on Darko.
Yeah, I agree. I would honestly put it at like a 99% chance that he's back. Like there's a
Yeah.
1% chance that I could see the Raptors being one and done with him. And it's funny because a lot of the other coaches have had high praise about Darko. Even the legend himself, Greg Popovich, spoke very highly of Darko. I think he called him underrated. And that's kind of been the tone from a lot of people around the league. They really like his style, his passion, his work ethic. And yeah, you touched on it. I mean, he was already dealt a very, very difficult hand because
Mhm.
the Raptors were in limbo when he got the job. They didn't fully commit to the rebuild before the start of the season, even though many people thought they were eventually going to rebuild as they did. So he had to try to win with that roster. Then you see all the roster turnover that happened. Like, put any coach in that situation. It's very, very difficult to go from a team trying to win to a complete rebuild to having so many of your players be traded, have a completely different team than the one you had during training camp, and still have this team looking overall competitive more times than not, even though they have been doing a lot of losing. So if this was like year three, I think you can say, okay, like it's time to move on from him. Because even in year two, it's still really early in the rebuild. If the Raptors are once again a bottom 16, but you see progressions, you see this team positively going on an upwards trajectory, you still give them some leeway. But yeah, if it's like year three and this team's still an abomination, then that's when I can see them moving on from Darko. But I definitely don't see them firing Darko after one season. Would you agree with that? Like, if this team is still where they are now next season, do you think he's on the hot seat? Hot seat? Like, I think it's a better chance that he does get fired. But I would still say like like I'm giving him till year three, unless like something drastic happens.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think when I said give him at least another year, I would probably still lean to probably year three is when you can probably judge his sample size. I think year two is definitely going to be big for him because we're going to see pretty considerable amount of this team returning, plus some new rookies. So it'll be interesting to see. But I think regardless, the Raptors probably aren't going to be that great heading into next season. But I think as they build time now and then with a full season next year and then heading into year three, I think we'll get a better sample size of who Darko is as a coach and how he's able to handle a rebuild. So, yeah, I would probably agree. Year three is probably when we can form decisions about his job security for sure.
Yeah, one full season next year will be huge with the big, the core three of Barnes, Barrett, and Quickly. And Darko, he's a player development coach. So, expect guys to continue taking leaps. And we saw with Barnes, we were all expecting as fans, it happened. And will we get this something similar with RJ, who is still only 23 years old? And you kind of see him like scratching the surface of being a player who can break out because he's definitely given more of a role on this Raptors team than he did in New York and even Emmanuel quickly. So we saw Barnes take that leap. Who would you say? I know we're looking ahead here, like of this Raptors team, if you had to bet on it, is a candidate of taking that next leap. Like, doesn't have to be as big as the one Barnes just made, but of just being significantly better with this Raptors team under Darko Rajakovic.
My pick is probably Emmanuel quickly. I know when he got traded over here, he talked about making or taking the leap of being a playmaker. And I think that's probably the next step for him because nobody's going to question his scoring ability. So I think for quickly, it's going to be huge for him to take that next step as the point guard. I know with the Raptors being so injured right now, he's kind of the lone guard right now. So he has to do a lot. But I mean, in the month of March, it's kind of a small sample size, but he's averaging 19 points and 10 assists, which is great. So I think for Emmanuel quickly, it's probably going to be uh, for him, it's going to be making him a more efficient scorer and then being able to feed off RJ and Scotty. So I think for Emmanuel quickly, it's going to be a big step for him. I know RJ made a case of how good he can be putting up career highs in his limited time in Toronto. So, but I'm going to take Emmanuel quickly. I really like the kind of player he is and the scoring capability that he has, but also seeing the growing playmaking ability that he has. Um, wasn't too great today with 4 turnovers and 5 assists, but I think overall he's shown the ability to play make, which in his time in New York, he wasn't really considered a playmaker at all. He was just come in off the bench and just score a bunch of baskets. So I think it's good for him to continue to build that playmaking ability, and I'm looking forward to seeing him continue that heading into next year for sure.
Let us know any comments you guys have or questions, as this is a post game live, different from my previous post games, as we got Matthew Valento on talking shop. And yeah, I agree. I think the interchangeable pick is going to be Quickly or Barrett, because you look at Barrett, I think he is going to break out. And you're starting to see a much different RJ Barrett. You know, he was utilized as like trying to be utilized as a 3-and-D type of player with the Knicks. Whereas here, you know, he's been getting downhill, aggressively getting to the rim. What's really impressed me is just his efficiency. Like the amount of 20+ point games he's had with the Raptors on good shooting numbers. Very, very good to see. He's getting to the foul line, which is important. And I think RJ having a full season with this team is just going to really, really benefit him. And I think the motivating factor for RJ is the fact that he is playing for his hometown team. He does have that motivation of playing for the team he grew up watching, and you could tell he wants to be here. You know, he's all smiles, and he plays with his heart on his sleeve. And that is a guy that people forget how young he is, just because of how young he was coming into the league. That he still has so much room for improvement. So I think that's the exciting part. If you're a Raptors fan, that you got your core three, but you got three guys who are nowhere near being done and still have a lot more polishing to have had with their games. And, you know, you look at even Barnes, he can keep getting better, Quickly can take that leap, RJ can take that leap. And that's kind of going to dictate how long this rebuild takes. Because if those three guys all continue to get better, take those leaps, and, you know, Raptors management has the right pieces around him, you know, some other guys too, like Grady Dick, and he take a nice leap in his second season. That's going to determine a whole lot. But these three players in particular, if Quickly and RJ get better and Barnes kind of has another all-star season that he had this season, I think the Raptors are going to be in a really good position as soon as next season. And obviously, they got the draft coming up too. So if you nail that, that's going to help a lot. You could have 3 picks, their own, the Indiana Pacers pick, and then the early second rounder, which is a late first. So yeah, no, this is a team that in a perfect world, they could, it doesn't have to be one of those like long, grueling rebuilds that we see with some of these other squads.
Yeah, for sure. I think with RJ, the biggest part of a rebuild is finding those guys you want to build around. And for Toronto, you kind of already did that in a pretty short amount of time. I know Scotty was kind of already foreshadowed as the number one guy. So it's good to have him finally solidified as the face of the franchise. But I think with RJ, yeah, as you mentioned, he's still super young, only 23 years old, and he's been in the league for several years. In New York, he kind of struggled to fit with Jalen Brunson and Julius Randle, who all demand the ball a fair amount. So it was very good to see RJ fit alongside Quickly, who he spent some time with the Knicks, and then feeding off Scotty Barnes. I think it was overall a very positive experience between those three. And it'll be interesting to see. He's shooting 41% from three in his 27 games with Toronto this year, which is absolutely exceptional. He
Yeah.
hasn't been great shooting from outside, so it'll be interesting to see how that keeps up with the full season in Toronto. Probably not at 41%, but hopefully he can kind of hover around that 35 to 38 range. That'll definitely open up his game a lot more. But yeah, he's looked super aggressive, getting downhill and also finding his groove with his jumper. So overall, very great to see and excited to see how he fits going forward. So
Yep, there's a lot to be excited about with this Raptors team. Obviously, it's been a very, very frustrating down season as this is a fan base that hasn't had a lot of those over the last decade. Haven't had any of those. I mean, you got to go back to those early 2010 teams to find a season that's been this bad. But sooner or later, the Raptors had to rebuild, had to go through this transitional phase, as every great team has to do. I mean, very rarely does a team stay on top of the NBA landscape. So, Raptors going through their lows right now. It's going to be a little bit of a grind these final 14 games, but brighter days are coming for this team. We are going to end it here, guys. We want to thank everybody who joined us for this post-game live stream. We'll definitely have Matt come on over for more of these, or even on the pod. Raptors Nation pod drops every Thursday. We do a post-game video after every Raptors game, plus other additional content. You can also find all of our work and content on raptorsnation.com. We are populating the site daily with some great written pieces. Matthew, also Ron has been helping out as well, and myself. So definitely want to check that out and follow us on Twitter. Follow me at Luca Rosano 3. You can follow Matthew Valento at Matthew Valento and keep up to date on all things Raptors. So thank you so much, Matthew, for joining us. And yeah, we'll see how the Raptors look and what their record is at the end of this 14-game stretch.
yeah, thank you for having me. It was a lot of fun. And for Raptors fans, hopefully you get some more losing in and able to cash in on a lottery pick this year.
Thanks so much for watching, guys. Lucas signing off. Until next time, stay safe.